In the autumn of 1802, Ludwig van Beethoven, 32 years old, holed up in a country inn outside of Vienna in despair. He was actually contemplating suicide, and he wrote a long letter, sort of a last will and testament to his two brothers, which begins this way, very movingly. "O you men who think or say that I'm malevolent, stubborn, or misanthropic, how greatly do you wrong me. You do not know the secret cause which makes me seem that way to you. From childhood on, my heart and soul have been full of the tender feeling of goodwill, and I was even inclined to accomplish great things. But think that for 6 years now, I have been hopelessly afflicted, made worse by senseless physicians, from year to year deceived with hopes of improvement, finally compelled to face the prospect of a lasting malady whose cure will take years or perhaps be impossible." Of course, the affliction he's speaking of is his growing deafness. He who thinks of himself as a master musician who should have the most highly developed sense of hearing is actually losing his hearing. And in fact, it would become permanent, his deafness, and it would become well known. He could no longer keep it a secret. It was that pain of keeping the secret, of hiding the fact that he couldn't hear well from others, that was driving him to despair. Beethoven's Second Symphony, still in the world of Haydn and Mozart, and yet so full of those original touches that could only be Beethoven. His originality is really beginning to burst out in this piece, and it's so fascinating to hear. I think you can hear it all right in the first movement. Just like a symphony by Franz Joseph Haydn, it begins with a long, solemn, slow introduction, and then begins a fun allegro. And that first theme in the allegro could be composed by Haydn, but the second theme could only be by Beethoven. The way he orchestrates it, the way it expands, the way it just opens up with good feeling, you would never think that this is a despairing young man. The second movement is perhaps the most beautiful second movement he ever composed. It's got one of his longest melodies, so tenderly developed. The third movement is a scherzo. This is significant because a scherzo is a minuet. It's a dance that is played so fast that no one could possibly dance it, hence the name scherzo, meaning joke in Italian. The sense of humor is part of what makes Beethoven Beethoven. And this third movement is just full of that, as is the fourth. The fourth is almost like a burlesque show. It's full of pratfalls and so much good, fun energy. So here we find a composer in the depths of despair, trying to figure out how to go on, and at the same time finding that way to go on. 1 year later, he would compose the Eroica Symphony, one of the most original pieces of music ever composed.